Let's hope Rahini doesn't watch.
Good evening and welcome. It is Deb and Bec, and we are here putting the balance back into relationships. So it's great to be here again. I love our Wednesday evenings and our show.
Yeah, and they always just speed by, don't they?
They do. I don't believe how quickly the hour goes.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things before we kind of get into our show tonight. One of the things, if you are signed up to our mailing list or if you've been following us at all, you will kind of maybe know a little bit about the story of our website.
And what a story. Oh, it's been... I don't even think there's a word for what it's been.
No. It's one of those times where I am incredibly grateful for what I understand about how life works and where our experience comes from. But we have just had problem after problem after problem with our website, and we've had people today trying to buy tickets to come to the conference, getting in touch with us and saying links aren't working and all sorts of strange and wonderful amazing things are happening when they try to go on our website. So if you are trying to buy conference tickets or looking at our retreat or anything like that on our website, I can only apologize and say, trust me, I am doing absolutely everything I know how to try and put this right, and speaking to anyone who will speak to me in the various places that the hosting is and the various things, and hopefully our website will be sorted soon, and we would love to have you at our conference, so please don't let it put you off getting a ticket.
And there is actually an alternative way to get your ticket if you're ready to get it and don't want to wait for the website to get fixed. Just be in touch with us. We've got all sorts of different ways we can help you with that, because we really want people to be in the room, and if it's because our website isn't as convenient as it should be, please let us know, because we're happy to kind of help you find another way of getting in the room. So we have got some other options there, so please be in touch if that's causing you some difficulties. Because bear with us, because
on the flip side of that, we've been doing a lot of things this week to do with the conference, so it's kind of shaping up to be really exciting. There's going to be some amazing speakers there, and we've got some little gifts and things going on for people who attend the conference, and so there's all sorts of exciting things going on. So we really don't want you to miss out. If you would like to be there, we would absolutely love you to be in the room, because we always love meeting people that have been our Facebook friends that we haven't seen in person. So
or YouTube, as this is.
YouTube, sorry, not Facebook.
YouTube,
obviously
Facebook, any social media. It's always really nice when you're engaging a lot with people online. When you actually get to meet them, it feels like greeting an old long lost friend, doesn't it? So yes, if you are hoping to come, we'd love to have you there. So on to our living and learning for this week. Ooh, well, what have we lived and what have we learned? I think for me, I'm going to start a little bit with the learning, because over the last week I have listened to a very short, maybe 10-minute Facebook webinar, a 1-hour webinar, and then a 5-minute podcast. So I've had quite a good week of little bits that I've been listening to and learning from, and a couple of the kind of highlights. One, the short Facebook video and the webinar was Angus and Rohini Ross, and they kind of talk a lot about relationships like us, so it kind of resonated a lot for me with how we talk about the principles. And what I really loved, Angus, they were actually having a conversation about anger and kind of getting wound up by, I think they were talking about their daughter, if I remember rightly. And
never imagine anyone getting wound up by any of their children.
I don't have daughters. And he was kind of likening that kind of what happens for him and that getting onto that anger train as being a bit like if you're out and you're kind of maybe in a local pub or something and you've had a couple of pints and then you're like, right, I sort of need to stop now, that's my limit, and I don't want to go, but you kind of carry on drinking, and he kind of said anger can be a bit like that. You sort of get a little bit het up and you should step away and take a breath and get off the anger train.
You should step away, the more you keep going forward,
and somehow you just kind of get and you want to get, and then he was kind of using this metaphor, and it sort of made me giggle. I think he started off by saying, I'm not sure if this is the best metaphor, but and then he went up, and it really was quite a good metaphor and quite something I really kind of saw. And I think that for me, what kind of came out of that is that feels the same for me with any kind of feeling, thought, story that we get kind of carried away with. It's very easy. Like, we often know for ourselves where we should sort of stop with those things. Like, for me, if I kind of get into some thinking, I kind of see a point where I'm like, I should really not kind of carry on down this story. I should really not, I feel like I'm jumping on a train here and I'm going to end up on the other side of England, I should jump off the train here, really. And somehow, the more we get to know ourselves, the more likely we are to get off the train at the next station. Oh yeah, that's enough. And then other times we just notice we haven't got off the train and we're like, something doesn't feel so good here. And yeah, there was just something really nice about the kind of metaphor he was using around that. That I really, really liked. And then during that same webinar, Rahini used a phrase, I think she said something like, there's health in the intelligence. And what she was what I kind of got from that was, in this system or this creative intelligence that we are, there's a health built in. And she was kind of talking exactly about that point we get to, where we sort of know we should get off that thought train. We sort of know that we need to step back. And there's a health there that even if we don't, even if we end up kind of going down that route, there's a health that brings us back to balance. It's built into this system, into the intelligence of the universe, that we will come back to balance, that we will kind of rebalance. It's designed as part of how we work, that health is within us and knows how to bring us back to that place of balance. So that was kind of a bit of my learning. And then the podcast that I listened to, which was only a 5-minute one of my faves, Michael Neal, he was talking about if you were the last human being on the planet. And I can't actually remember most of what he was talking about, but something in what he started with when he said about the last human being on the planet spiraled me off onto, I wrote a whole blog about it, and really kind of brought back to me that even if we were the last human being on the planet, we are still capable, because it looked, I think at first hearing, I was like, oh yeah, if I was the last human being on the planet, I wouldn't have to worry about this because no one would be there to judge me. I wouldn't have to think about this because I wouldn't have to worry what everybody else thought. I could go and do this because who's going to care? But then as I kind of went through, I was like, do you know what would happen then? Is I'd have judgmental thinking. I'd care about the fact that I was doing that. I'd be angry at even if there's no one there to be angry at, I'd be angry, and we're still, as human beings, even if I was the only one on the planet, somehow all of those thoughts and feelings that we experience would still be available to me, and I'd still have those experiences. And it just reminded me again that we're so good at pretending that the experiences and the feelings that we're having are because of that person or their thinking or their judgment of us or their, desires and whatnot. And it just reminded me, I was kind of listening to it, imagining myself pottering around on this whole planet all by myself. And I just, for a few minutes, it was like, oh yeah, this is cool. I can do anything. Oh yeah, except I'm going to judge myself for doing that. And then I'm going to get angry with myself for doing this. And it just kind of, I don't know, I just really saw that whole, even in that space, we're going to have that kind of thinking and that kind of feeling.
It's amazing, isn't it, how it kind of points us to the oneness, actually, doesn't it, of how we are all one, judging ourselves and criticizing and seeing those things in ourselves. So our lighting seems
really terrible.
Yes.
So you talk for a minute.
Me talk?
And I'll just go and switch.
Okay. So living and learning this week. So as you probably know from what I said at the very beginning of tonight, what I have been living an awful lot this week is trying to sort out the website. And it has been, whoa, sorry. Let there be light. That's better, yes.
Sorry, everyone, back now.
So yeah, it's been an amazing lesson for me, getting into conversations with different people about what is going on with our website and how to mend it. And where do I start? It's just been, on the 90 days that we're doing, one of the things that I committed, we all made a commitment during, for our 90 days, we were all going to commit to something. And one of the things that I committed to was being kinder. And it's been hugely helpful for me to have that in the back of my mind, that kind of, that's where I'm going at the moment. In any given situation, how can I be kind here? You know, I'm kind of showing up and you get angry with somebody and annoyed with somebody, and then it's kind of like, how do you be kind here? And so getting into conversations with people, because we have our hosting in one place and we have our domain name in some, you know, there's all sorts of, and I'm not technical, so I don't understand it, and I don't really know what the different people do. I don't really know how this all comes together. So I'm kind of having conversations with people and sort of saying, our website isn't working, you know, could it be something that you're doing? And they're kind of saying, oh no, you know, if they're the host, no, it's absolutely the people with your domain, and the domain do, oh, it's absolutely the people with your hosting. So I've kind of been going backwards and forwards to these people and spending, it's felt like, you know, my head is kind of going to me, you're wasting a lot of time here. And this person should be doing something different. This person is to blame. They are responsible. They should do something. And it's been incredible watching what my head does and feeling that thinking, feeling that frustration, that annoyance, that want to scream and yell at someone, and then kind of have this little voice say, you know, how can you be kind here? How can you be kind? And I have found it incredibly interesting to kind of then go to type into, because I've been speaking to these people on live chat. So then kind of go in to type something on live chat, and kind of what wants to come out is a lot of things that you don't say on a YouTube
I was just going to say, don't say it, Deb.
I'm sure you can imagine. I'm sure you've all kind of felt that frustration, you know, and you want to kind of say, and then to kind of just have that split second and then kind of go back with something kinder, with something softer and more gentle and more helpful, and to kind of see, actually, do you know, I've had some really lovely conversations with people, and it's been a completely different experience, even though, you know, there's no guarantee, as you can see with the problems we're still having with our website, that doing that will sort out the problem. But my experience of it has been incredibly different. And from the perspective, I know these are the types of things. We were talking about ill health to somebody. We were having a conversation with a lovely lady the other day. We were talking about ill health and, you know, how we can get poorly and physical pain and things like that, and the connection between physical pain and our thinking. And what I have really seen for me is that when I get into overthinking, when I kind of go down those avenues, one of the go-to places where I used to get very, very poorly and really struggle and suffer was I would get headaches, a lot of migraine headaches, and be in bed and really not be well. And I've kind of watched over this week while I've been sorting this stuff out and seen myself kind of pull back from that place where I got stressed and my shoulders were tight, and, you know, I could feel it up the back of my neck when I do my neck and my shoulders. And then the next thing that happens to me is a headache. And I've noticed that none of that has happened this time, none of it at all. I've kind of gone, do you know what? Do what is yours to do, and trust that right now your website isn't supposed to be okay. I don't know why it isn't, but right now, for whatever reason, your website is exactly as it should be, and that is perfectly okay. And kind of really sort of looking at that and really kind of going there, if you like, sitting with that and kind of, you know, is it true that the website shouldn't be up and running at the moment? And everything in my, you know, everything in my intellect is kind of saying, you run a business, you've got a retreat coming up, you've got a conference coming up, you want people to work with you on mentoring and to get in touch with you and do things like this. Are you crazy that you think your website, you know, that it's okay for your website to be like this? And then when I kind of sit through that and just kind of be, well, it is like that. And I could listen to that thinking, and I could see that as true, and I could take all that on, and I could suffer a lot. So my website will be down and I'll be suffering, or my website will be down and I'll be having a much lighter, freer experience of that. And then what can come through me is ideas of how to get around that. We've had some fantastic conversations with people who want to come to the conference, and we've had all sorts of people book on the retreat in spite of the fact that that is what is going on with our website. And it's like, it's been an amazing lesson for me to kind of stick with this kindness, to kind of stick with seeing something different and noticing, even if there are no guarantees that that means that the world will do what you want it to do, there's something even deeper, there's something even better on offer here. If you kind of, if you make that commitment and decide that's what you're going to do and step into that bigger version of who you are and just gently look in that direction, it is amazing what can happen.
It's really interesting that you started talking about the conversation we were having around physical health, because we were actually speaking to somebody on a mentoring call yesterday, and in the midst of that we were talking a little bit like exactly what Deb shared there, some of the physical health stuff we'd talked about on this other call, and off the back of that we kind of the person on the mentoring call said something about some food and a situation and not enjoying the food and feeling a bit sick about the food. And off the back of that, Deb was kind of grinning at me, and I'm like, what? I'm sitting there kind of, what's she grinning at me for? And she kind of looks at me and is like, you know all about that kind of thing, don't you? What do you mean, Deb? And she's like, you, with your food, you, when you were like younger, you used to really have like this whole thing about food
story.
And for a good, like, I don't know, half a second, whatever, I'm really confused, because I'm thinking, no, I'm like, I love food. I eat lots of food. Oh yeah. Oh, I remember now. And I suddenly remembered, and I was quite confused by it for a second, wasn't I? I was looking at you a bit like, funny. I don't know. I think Deb's got me confused with somebody else, because that was one of those things, a lot like the physical stuff, like Deb was saying. She used to have scenarios like that, like the website stuff, that would have in the past would have inevitably ended up in a migraine and a couple of days in bed.
Yep.
And we're then talking about this conversation about how it used to be for me around food. I used to just be, I mean, the only words for it were extremely fussy and difficult around food, wasn't I?
Incredibly difficult.
It's really strange kind of talking about it. And yesterday when we were talking about it, I was kind of talking about it thinking, this doesn't feel like me. I vaguely remember it being me, but it just, and there was just all sorts of things that used to happen. Like if the family got together for food, which we often did and still do, somebody would have to bring something separate for me. My dad would often turn up with food for me because I just wouldn't eat what was being prepared. If we went out for meals and stuff, we'd have to check the menu to make sure there was something that Bec would eat. And it's just, no, never. And I was just unbelievably like specific and controlling about what I could and couldn't eat, and it was all done very innocently. I kind of, I wasn't there intentionally trying to be difficult.
Certainly when we were living through that, I don't think anyone realised how made up that was. And it definitely started from a place. I find it interesting when I watch people have allergies around food and intolerances around food, because it definitely started for you as a child when it appeared that you had allergies and intolerances. And it was kind of like, it's a fascinating,
it just slowly built up into this really big story,
huge story.
And what I find interesting about it for me, and I think this is kind of a living thing that's happened for me this week, over about the last week or week and a half, I have just in a number of conversations gone to talk about something and noticed that thing just isn't there for me anymore. And the food was definitely one of them. Like that just isn't, like anyone, there's a couple of things I probably wouldn't eat if I didn't have to, but for the most part I love food. I quite like cooking. I like trying different things, and never when I go out for a meal now am I thinking, I wonder if there'll be something on the menu. I'm like, oh, can't wait to see what's on the menu. And that has just entirely, that's a story that's just entirely dropped away for me. And I started writing a list the other day because I was kind of like, oh, isn't it interesting that I've just started to notice, because I can't remember if I talked about this last week, but I used to have a massive fear of dogs. That was another one. And there's 2 or 3 things that are kind of something around control and anxiety stuff that I used to really do and be really kind of clingy and controlling with some stuff, and those things have dropped away for me, and there's just been a number of things over the last week that I've really kind of gone, oh yeah, that's not there anymore. oh yeah, I don't do that so much anymore. That's not a problem for me anymore.
I think as we begin to see the nature of thought and the nature of how our experience is created, that need for control definitely gets less. And I can definitely see over the website, you know, what comes up for me in those moments is this need for it to be a certain way. You know, my thinking kind of says it should be this way, it should be like this, and you should be the one to make it like that. You know, these people you're talking to should do what you think they should do because this is how it should be. And it's definitely kind of seeing that you're not in control of that, and no amount of hitting your head against a brick wall, no amount of kind of stressing about that is going to change that fact. And I think sometimes when you're kind of in that moment, you know, I've seen people be in that space and it's kind of like wanting to, you know, if you point out to somebody that stressing about it and doing that isn't going to change it, very often the response is they just want to punch you, you know, because it doesn't feel helpful in that moment. And yet my experience from the other side, you know, as I watch other people go into that space and hear myself kind of saying that stressing out isn't helpful. This is how it is. This is the world you live in. This is what's going on. So if you love what's going on, if you are totally okay with what's going on, that opens up a whole different perspective on this. This opens up other things that you just can't see from all this, you know, revved up thinking. And so I find it fascinating working with clients and speaking to people and seeing, you know, places where people go. And I kind of make a mental note, actually note to myself when I get into that place, even though if someone else might say to me, you know, don't stress about this, and that might feel frustrating, it's okay if I say it to me, you know, hey, just don't stress here because there's just no good going to come of it at all. And it feels like, you know, when I do that, it's amazing what drops away and what changes and what opens up to us when we just begin to kind of just see things. You only need the tiniest crack and enormous amount of light can flood into us and we can have a totally different experience of something. And I just love how that happens in real life situations for real people. You know, this understanding is incredibly helpful in ordinary, normal, everyday things that we all do. And even if you don't do website stuff, there'll be other things, you know, there's people in the world who can just appear to be incredibly annoying and irritating. And when we kind of have this, when we understand the nature of thought and how our experience is actually being created, it just gives us that tiny space to see something different. Magic happens from those places.
Yeah, and the kind of where I was going to go next was that dropping away for me of the, you know, the food issue that I used to have, that isn't even something I've worked at or tried to deal with or anything at all. Like there's been no effort on my part to fix that at all.
There's always a few little gifts thrown in when you
bonus surprise when you turn up to this conversation. But it is very much that, and that's the thing for me that I love, because I kind of come from a background of I used to go to church, and then I was also involved and did a lot of work around psychotherapy and that kind of thing. And for both of those, for me, felt like at times hard work. Like I had to do the right things. I had to turn up and work at something. I had to approach something a certain way. I had to follow certain steps or have a particular technique to deal with. And it always felt like there was more work involved. And the thing for me about this conversation and those things that have dropped away is that I've done less work. I've kind of stepped away from having to fix myself. And in doing that, those things have just gone away. And I think that's like, oh, I just love that. It's just so light and easy that there's not been this burden to try and resolve something and fix it and get in at the deep end and work it out. And it's just been a really pleasant conversation for kind of 5 years. And off the back of that, as I've gone along, certain things have just dropped away and melted like as easy as that. And I just love that. It's just really nice, isn't
it? It is. So we have had a question this week.
Yes, so our question this week, I'll read out the question and then I might put a bit of context to it because it might sound odd on its own. So the question is, it's not fair, why should it be me? And the kind of context to that is in a relationship when there's been a falling out, and inevitably one person usually kind of makes the first move in terms of resolving that conflict and that argument and that fallout. And kind of, I think it was in the midst of a conversation with somebody one of us was talking to, who was kind of saying, yeah, I can see that we probably need to resolve this. We probably need to get past this argument, but it's not fair. Why should it be me? Which is a great question.
I know we've touched on this before, because I know this is something that I have seen come up more than once.
Yeah,
when you kind of help people around relationships, it's definitely very often. When we are looking in this direction, when people come to us, certainly with relationship problems, I mean, a relationship problem by its very nature very often involves someone else. We kind of say, and it's like, I've got a problem with this person did this. And even though we can very often, well, certainly if we get quiet, we can see our own, we can see where we were involved in that. But it is something, I think it's an incredibly different way to approach relationships that this understanding points us towards. That in actual fact, and I know sometimes when I talk to people, when I'm first talking to them and they've come to me with a relationship problem and the other person isn't with them, it's kind of like you can feel that annoyance. You can feel that, well, there are at least 50% to blame. And usually in our mind, when we've got to that place, most of us, if we hold our hands up and tell the truth, it's kind of like we think they're at least 90% to blame. And we did something, but, they were mostly to blame. And then it's kind of, why am I the one sitting here? Why should I be the one that's doing all the legwork? Why am I the one that's kind of trying to put things right? And it's a conversation that I've been in more than once. And it does, I have to say, you can see when you're looking at someone, you can see why that feels so unfair when it seems to you that someone else has done something. And very often, when I'm in these conversations with people, I've worked a lot with people who have been in abusive relationships. And, the things that they're saying that this other person has done, nobody's saying these people didn't do that, and nobody is saying that it was, what they did was right. I've heard some horrific stories, but what I see, what I absolutely see around that is, however unfair it feels that you are the one that is sitting here and putting this right and, working this out, I just see the amazingness of the system that we have been blessed to be born into, that it is possible that just you showing up here can change everything. Because I just think, as much as when we're sat there and we want the other person to be involved and we want them to do their share of the work or pay for their mistake or put right whatever it is they've done, I just think if that is how this system actually worked, that it did take two of you, that person did have to change, that person did have to do something, then this conversation would be a whole different conversation, because the world would just not work in the way that it does. We would live on an entirely different planet, on an entirely different reality, in an entirely different way, because it's just not how life works. And I think we are incredibly blessed that no matter what has happened to you, no matter how bad, it does not matter what has happened in the past. If you show up ready for something different, it only takes you to show up ready for something different, and something different can happen. And I really love to kind of bring that round and just show how blessed we are that it works like that. Because if the other person, for whatever reason, isn't willing or able to do that, we would be well and truly stuck.
I wondered how you were going to end that sentence. Yeah, it's for me, it's very much that we often start. In fact, we did a webinar the other week that was called Relationships Unraveled. What was it? It starts with you, or something like that, wasn't it? It was all about you. That was it. It's all about you, and it is that for me. It's that kind of going in the opposite direction. It's looking at something from completely the different angle. We often in society, and the way kind of we're brought up and that kind of thing is, you know, you hear things like it takes two to tango and those kinds of sayings, and we're just so, I know, and we're just so used to being told, you know, you've got to meet in the middle, you've got to have both of you on board, you know, if you have kind of relationship counselling,
got to communicate, you've got to talk,
both of you, him and her, you and him, that, and it's just this message is constantly out there. And it just, like we were saying in the last kind of when we were talking about living and learning, and we were kind of saying when we turn up, like Deb's exploration recently about being kinder, when we turn up from that space, it's incredible what can come through us. And I know, like we've seen it time and again, I think in our relationships and with people that we've worked with, that when we turn up differently, because I know I have in my relationship and I know Deb has,
very much so.
something changes, and somehow it's a space where the other person can take it or leave it in a way. It's like, for me, I started turning up differently in my relationship, and I'd got it built up that my partner was this particular type of person. He was this, he was that, he was the other. And then I started changing and I started seeing something differently. And suddenly all those things that I got that he's not those things. I mean, he might be in one moment sometimes, but like I kind of got it down. He was sort of funny. And now that I'm different and I see something different, he makes me laugh all the time. Like, not always intentionally, but sometimes. But he is an incredibly funny guy, sort of sarcastic funny, clever funny, jokes funny. And I just had not seen that about him very much at all. And it's me that changed around that. And I you know, that's a fairly unemotive example. And you know, for me, this works across the board. So, you know, in terms of seeing my partner in a different way, in that I now realize how funny he actually is, all the way to something like you were talking about, where people have been through stuff and there's been some real abuse and emotional difficulties and that sort of thing. It literally takes one person to see even the tiniest thing differently, and everything can change. The whole relation, it kind of can't not. It's a bit like if you, I know you have, was it your mother-in-law that used to cut pieces off her jigsaw puzzle?
Yep.
When she couldn't get the pieces of her jigsaw puzzle to fit, she would just cut it to make it fit, and it changes the whole picture. Suddenly the picture's going to have a piece missing because it's in the wrong place. And it's that, you know, it's as soon as one person sees something differently and turns up from a slightly different angle, you know, tries to be a little bit kinder, opens the mind to the possibility that their partner is funny, everything shifts. It tilts everything, and it's impossible for that not to happen when we see something different.
And I just think it's the most amazing and best gift ever, that it only takes one person to do that, and that person is me.
Yeah.
You know, or you. Yeah. It is. Initially, when we first hear this, I think it's quite difficult in the society we've been brought up in, and the way that we've been pointed towards, you know, in relationships over and over again, you know, that you all these things that Bec was talking about, to kind of see something 180 degrees differently. It's a big ask at first, but definitely I think the more people that begin to kind of be open to this and see this, the only person that you ever need to change is you. And you can do that. It's doable. So
yeah, and I think it comes back to that, exactly what we were just talking about. Those things drop away when we're in this conversation, when we see something differently, when we get to know the nature of thought, when we get to know the truth of who we are. Somehow things drop away, like my situation with how difficult it used to be to find anything to eat because I was so determined to control it all. When that just, like, when I saw how life really worked without meaning to, I hadn't intended for that to happen. I just stopped being difficult around food. Food's nice, I can eat it. Oh, that's amazing, I didn't realize
Who
that.
knew?
And that for me is the same here with relationships. And I'm talking about, I think the example and the question came from a husband-wife type relationship.
Yeah,
but
was.
Any relationship, whether it's your work colleague, your business partner, if you have housemates, whatever it might be, those relationships start with you and you seeing something different. And by being in this conversation, by talking like the way that we do and sharing what we see around relationships, something just shifts. And one of the things when I listened to the webinar I was talking about earlier, Rohini was talking about, I think the starting conversation was how she wasn't 100% in her marriage. She just wasn't 100% in her marriage. That was kind of what she talked about to begin with. And I think she was saying her and her husband had split up and got back together a few times. And then when she came to this conversation over the course of time, and she didn't come to the conversation to save her marriage. That wasn't her. It was to do with, I think, her actual work. But over the course of time, as she learned her true nature and saw how thought worked, she suddenly realized that she'd been looking for her husband to fix everything, to be the right person, to do the right thing, to respond in the right way. All those kinds of things that we talk about, we've been there. And she saw that wasn't necessary for her to be okay, for her to know her true nature. And as she saw that, as that kind of unfolded for her, suddenly she noticed she was 100% in, because there was nothing riding on it. There was no kind of Angus owes me this or Angus needs to be this. She was just 100% in. And I think that's what the kind of crux of that question is for me. It's not fair, why should it be me? Comes from someone who isn't 100% in, because they've misunderstood what it means to know where our happiness and our peace and the things that we're all kind of looking for, happiness, peace, love, joy, whatever it might be. We're looking for those things and we misunderstand where they come from. And so we don't go 100% in because we can't trust that person's going to make us happy or trust that they're going to behave the right way. So we don't put ourselves 100% in to any kind of relationship, whatever it might be. And when we see that is not where happiness comes from, that's not where our peace and joy abides, then we can be 100% in on any relationship in front of us, because it's not going to take anything away from us.
No. And I think one of the reasons that we don't go 100% in, and one of the reasons why we kind of come up with those questions, it's not fair, why me, is because we're kind of saying, I'll go 100% in if you do. You go first, you do that. And the reason that we kind of do that is because we have been taught in no uncertain terms, don't be vulnerable. Don't put yourself in a place where you can be shot down. Don't, you'll get hurt.
You've got something to lose.
You can be hurt. There's something riding on this. And I absolutely think that this understanding blows that out of the water. It's perfect. Excuse me. It's perfectly okay to be vulnerable. It's perfectly okay to kind of to show up like that and to be the first one and go, hey, guess what? I'm going to go all in first. And very much. I was listening to something this week. I don't know if anyone's heard of Brené Brown, who does she talks shame and vulnerability. She talks a lot about that, and she says some amazing things. And the things that woman has seen, and she's just missing this tiny little bit, because she believes that she can see that when we show up and we are okay to be vulnerable, and very much that as human beings we kind of have this idea that we can't, we shouldn't show our vulnerable side, and we try to hide it and we try to protect it and we try not to do that. And it's kind of, to me, the reason why I know that I'm okay to show up like that and do that is because I understand that there is nothing riding on it. I see that there is nothing that can be added to me and nothing that can be taken away from me. And I just think seeing my true nature, seeing that kind of, it's not that it stops being scary showing up as being vulnerable. You know, we still feel the same way, but it's okay to do that. And I can really see that, you know, just doing these kinds of things, showing up on a YouTube show and putting it out there for anyone to kind of see what we're talking about would have been out of the question for me when I didn't understand that there's nothing riding on this and it's perfectly okay to do this.
Yeah, I like what you said there about it's okay to be vulnerable. It's not that we don't feel that sometimes. It's not that we don't get those moments of you know, fear and scare, and but it's knowing,
very real.
Yeah, they are, and it's knowing the okayness of those, which I think actually leads us very nicely into our topic this week.
We're having a little bit of a lighting issue.
Yeah, we are.
Our light seems to be dying.
Yes, haven't recharged the batteries so much, so
bear with us, please.
And, hopefully, what we're saying is you can hear it even though our faces are a bit dark, and actually what we're saying is probably more important than our faces anyway.
Definitely.
So our topic this week is acceptance of fearful thoughts, which I think off the back of what you just said there, it's a really nice, sorry, my chair's a bit, it's a really nice starting point, isn't it, that we can have thoughts and they can feel, you know, they feel scary, we get the whole experience that comes with it, you know,
we
full
do.
on kind of Hollywood effects going on, and yet we have the capability of not actually being drawn into that story in the same way. There's an experience of thoughts and feelings that we can have that's a really accepting experience. And I know it's something we've actually talked a lot about again in the last couple of weeks. It's something we've kind of revisited, this acceptance of, and not even just fearful thinking, but whatever fears, whatever feelings we're having, a real acceptance of those feelings. And for me, it goes back to one of my favourite sayings of what we resist persists.
Yep.
I just absolutely love the simplicity of that statement of somehow if there's a part of us that's resisting what's happening, those fearful thoughts or any other kind of thoughts and feelings, when we're in that space of resisting it, this shouldn't be happening. You know, like Deb was saying at the beginning, our website shouldn't be broken. When we're in resistance to what is, somehow it's holding it in place. Somehow it's keeping that experience alive. And it often reminds me of, like, if you've ever got your car stuck in mud and you rev your engine, have you ever noticed that your wheels just get further and further and further stuck into the mud? It's that resistance that holds those fearful thoughts in place. And somehow the knowing that it's okay to have fearful thoughts, the knowing that whatever thoughts and feelings we're having are welcome, and that we do not have to be afraid of them being in existence. That is the acceptance for me.
And I think very often the thing about thought, you know, when it passes through our system and we have thoughts, is they're incredibly powerful, or certainly some of them are. You know, the ones that just kind of trickle through us, we're good with those. But, you know, sometimes we have incredibly, you know, the experience we have of fear and anxiety and any of those, you know, when we get emotion and, you know, when we get an emotional reaction to something, when a thought does that to us, you know, when a thought runs through us and we get a full on emotional reaction that can feel physical, you know, we can, our hearts can lurch, they can beat fast, we can practically pass out, you know, panic attacks, all of those kinds of things are thoughts passing through us. And when somebody says, you know, you don't have to worry about that, you don't have to be scared about that, it's totally understandable when we kind of come back with, yeah, but are you crazy? Do you know what my thinking is like? You know, do you know what happened to me? Do you know what was going on there? And so I think, you know, from that perspective, the more that I have understood the nature of thought and that there is nothing that I need to be fearful of in my thinking. And initially, you know, when I first kind of heard that, there was so much freedom in that. And then I looked at it and realized that I'd kind of applied that, if you like, if applied is the, or seen that, whatever the word is, to kind of this much, and if the light's not good, this much of my thinking. And over the years that I've been around this, I've just seen it in more and more and more places, that I don't have to be scared of what it is I'm thinking. And very much like Bec said, the conversations we've been having over the last few days, I noticed that my mind could do this thing to me. If I thought certain things, my mind would kind of taunt me with oh, you're supposed to know about this. You're supposed to be way more spiritual than this. You shouldn't be thinking that, whatever it is. My mind can really, really taunt me. And it's kind of knowing that it feels to me, the more that I love all of the thinking that I have, there was some thinking that I'd have and I'd be like, oh yeah, I love it when I think that, I love that thinking. And then I might have a thought about somebody who I am supposed to love, one of my daughters, or I don't know, just a little thought would sneak in something, and I'm like, oh, you're not supposed to think that, you're better than that, you're not supposed to have thoughts like that. And then there would be this whole trying to pretend that I'm not thinking it, or trying not to think it, or trying to be better than that so I didn't think it. And I don't know, a whole host of things that I'm sure you've had the same experience or some version of that. And it was kind of seeing, hey, do you know what? I just love that sometimes I have shitty thinking that I have no idea why I have that, about all sorts of people for all sorts of reasons. And it's just, I'm good with that. I don't mind. It's that thinking isn't me, and I don't necessarily have to own that thinking and kind of go into it and go, yeah, that means I don't like that person, or I'm annoyed at that person. It means that thought passed through my head. I don't have to own it and make it be me and make it be mine. I can just love it. I can just be like, hey, yeah, you can come in too. It's all good, all welcome, all loved. And the more that I am just perfectly okay with it being there, it kind of takes the power off that. It takes the power out of that thought. It's like, oh, you're not going to argue with me then and push me away and hide me and pretend you don't have me. You're just going to welcome me with all the others. Yeah. And somehow that takes the sting out of the tail of that thought.
It's really interesting kind of what you're saying there, because it's just reminded me, I'm reading Byron Katie's book at the moment, 1,000 Names for Joy, and I love the way she talks about this kind of thing. I would say a lot of what she points to is that kind of acceptance of, she refers to it as acceptance of what is. So whatever is, what is happening, there's availability for us to be accepting of that. And she writes, her book's so funny, the things that she comes out with, and I was hysterical the other night because she shared a story of an example of where she was just so incredibly accepting of what is, and the example she gave was, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but if you take a drink of something, water, tea, whatever it might be, and it goes down what appears to be the wrong pipe, and you're choking and you're kind of coughing, spluttering, trying to spit it out because it's gone down your windpipe instead of into your stomach, and it's not a comfortable feeling for the first couple of minutes that's happening, and generally I think our bodies try and cough it back up a little bit. And she'd had a moment where that had happened, and the way she even writes the book, she's saying it had gone down what people call the wrong pipe, but I knew it wasn't the wrong pipe because that's where it was going, so it must have been the right pipe. And she's kind of talking about how this is happening to her, and she's just in full acceptance mode, and she's kind of, and in the book she kind of writes, and just for a minute or two I'm a fish. And I mean, that tickled me. Our light's just gone off. I think that's it. It's really bad time. Sorry, we've gone extremely dark, but we'll keep talking because I think we're almost finished anyway. And she's kind of talking about this scenario, and she said, and just for a minute or two, I'm a fish, and that's perfectly fine with me. And then the moment's passed, and I'm, a human being breathing again. And it really, really tickled me. And I was kind of reading it thinking, I just can't imagine having that reaction. If that happens to me, I'm gonna.
It's gonna be the wrong pipe.
Interestingly, today I'm out at a cafe and I have a cup of tea, and I think I take my first sip and it's quite nice, and I'm stirring it a little bit and enjoying it, and I take my next sip and it goes down the wrong pipe, and for a couple of moments I'm coughing and I'm And then Byron Katie's voice is in my head, and she's like, oh, look, you're a fish for a minute. And it's just within a matter of seconds, it's gone. I'm not coughing. I'm not fighting it. I'm not resisting it anymore. And my body just deals with it. And it's gone. Within a moment, it's gone, because I'm in total acceptance. And I'm also laughing in my head about being a fish for a minute. And I'm right by the sea, so it feels really appropriate. And that, to me, was a prime example of, the more I'm in this conversation, the more those things come to me. The more in moments like that, it comes to me to go, oh, yeah, I wonder if I could be accepting of this and have a fish moment. And I did. I was totally. It took me a minute. You know, it wasn't instant. It was a momentary thing where I was like, "Ooh, I've got to fight this. It's not the right pipe." And then I settled back into, oh yeah, what if it is the right pipe? What if there was exactly the right place for my tea to go? You know, what if my lungs were thirsty? I don't know. Maybe they were. And then I'm okay. And I'm a fish for a minute. And then I'm Becky again in a cafe, and I'm enjoying my tea. And it really struck me as how, I only read that a couple of days ago. And I think for me, the sitting in this conversation, somehow by osmosis, we kind of absorb those kind of ideas and wonderment about whether it's possible to accept even the choking when the tea's going apparently down the wrong pipe. And it really kind of hit me, oh yeah, even here, if I resist, it persists. Because I know in the past, if I've had a situation like that, I'm coughing and coughing and coughing for a good 5, 10, 15 minutes before I really feel clear again. Yeah. And it had gone within minutes because I had dropped into acceptance of it. And it really blew me away. I was like, oh, there's that acceptance again. There's the example of how what we resist persists. And when we're in acceptance, just what is what is.
Mm-hmm. And I just think, like Bec says, the more that we are aware of this, the more that we're in this conversation, the more those kinds of thoughts occur to us in those moments. A little bit, you know, when we make the commitment to be kinder, when we do any of these things, it's kind of, it comes into our awareness somehow. And it feels to me like it opens up the possibility that we will have that kind of thinking. You know, we will have, something will occur to us in those moments, and we will see something different to what we have seen in the past. And that has certainly been my experience. My thinking, I know, you know, when you first come across the principles, and you kind of, you see the connection between we think what we feel, and it kind of makes sense to kind of say, right, okay, I'm only going to think good things. And I think kind of going in there and trying to control your thinking and trying to make yourself think certain things, that's not how this system really works. There are moments when it feels as if I can, you know, make myself think something or not think something, but it doesn't look like that's how the system works, and I can do that long term. And yet, a byproduct of being in this conversation and opening our mind and getting curious about what else is possible for us somehow opens up a whole new branch of thinking that just occurs to me. You know, it changes my thinking changes. And I don't have to do that. That's not my job. But it feels like getting curious, playing around with this, looking in this direction, staying in this conversation, all of those things open my mind to possibilities that just a short time ago would have just looked ridiculous to me, would have looked like there's no way you can ever do that. And yet what we are capable of as human beings from those places blows my mind when we get into this conversation. So
I'm wondering, because it's gone extremely dark and we now just look like ghostly, no, not even ghostly, just dark, frightening shadows of our former selves, whether that might be a nice place to kind of finish and just share what's coming up next week, and call it a day, so that nobody has to sit and stare at our slightly scary dark faces. Indeed. So next week our topic is negative or kind of difficult people. So
yeah, we all have those. We all have those people in our lives, don't we?
Yeah.
So,
and then our question next week is around if we've come to a place in our lives where we felt we've had to shut down our feelings for some reason, then how do we start to feel again? Because it can become quite normal. We can really get into a habit of shutting off our feelings and ignoring kind of what's going on for us, to maybe to get through a difficult time in our lives, or a relationship that's been troubling, or that kind of thing. So when we've had to shut down our feelings and gotten used to doing that, how do we start to feel again? And I think that actually kind of follows on quite nicely from tonight's question. So looking forward to that next week.
So that'll be at 5:30 again next Wednesday evening here on YouTube. So we will create a link for you to join us if you want to join us live.
Yeah.
So if you've enjoyed this, if you've enjoyed our show and you like what we talk about and you want to work with us on a slightly more intimate basis, if you want to talk to us about that, then we do have some spaces to do that at the moment. So
yeah,
you do be great to hear from you. And obviously all the things we were talking about at the beginning, we have one space left on our retreat at the moment. We've actually taken it, even if you do manage to get on our website, we've actually stopped you being able to join the retreat on there because there is only one space, and we couldn't make it only one space available, so more than one person could have booked it. So if you are at all interested in that, just message us and we'll tell you the details and sort that out.
Yes, thank you very, very much for joining us, and we will see you hopefully next week.
Hopefully before that.
Or before.
Yep, we're about somewhere. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.